There's something about a flame you can control. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, a soft cloth in one hand and a 1967 Zippo Slim in the other, brushed chrome, barely a scratch on it, the hinge still tight after 40 years. I found it at a yard sale in Dundalk for $3. The guy selling it had no idea what he had. I did. That's the thing about me. I notice things. I notice everything. The cloth moves in small circles over the metal, and the apartment is so quiet I can hear the fridge humming and the tick of the wall clock above the stove. It's 9:47 on a Thursday night. Natalie's shift at the bank ended at 6. I hear her car pull into the lot downstairs. The familiar groan of the Civic's engine cutting off, the thunk of the door. Her heels on the stairwell, that quick, slightly uneven rhythm she has, like she's always in a hurry to get somewhere that isn't here. I don't look up when the door opens. "Hey," she says. "Hey." I keep polishing. She drops her bag on the counter, not hung on the hook by the door the way she used to, just tossed. I give her my usual tired smile when she passes through the kitchen. She's already pulling the clip out of her hair, shaking it loose, moving toward the bathroom. That's when I see it. A tiny smear on the collar of her cream-colored blouse, just below the jawline on the left side. A shade of foundation that's too dark for her. Natalie is fair. She wears ivory bisque, or whatever they call it. I know because I've bought it for her twice when she forgot to pick it up. This smear is warmer, deeper. Like someone with an olive complexion pressed their face against her neck. I say nothing. She passes close enough for me to catch something else, a faint, smoky sweetness buried under her usual perfume. Clove cigarettes. Natalie doesn't smoke. She hates smoking. She made me throw away my uncle's ashtray when we moved in together because she said it smelled like death. And yet, there it is, clove and sweetness clinging to her hair like a secret she forgot to wash off. I keep polishing the Zippo. Later, after she's showered and changed, I notice something else. For years, 17 years in this apartment to be exact, Natalie has had a ritual. She takes off her wedding ring and places it in a small ceramic dish by the bathroom sink before washing her hands at night. Every single night. It's one of those tiny, unconscious habits that become the architecture of a marriage. You don't think about them until they change. Tonight, the dish is empty. She goes to bed with the ring on. I stand in the bathroom doorway for a long moment looking at that empty dish. It's white with a faded blue flower pattern. We bought it at a craft fair in Fells Point the year we got married. It cost $2. It's worth nothing and everything at the same time. I go to bed. She's on her side, facing the wall. I slide in beside her, stare at the ceiling. After a minute, I say, "Rough day at the bank?" She pulls the blanket higher. "Just audits, endless paperwork, you know how it is." I do know how it is. I know because she spent 3 weeks in January complaining about the annual audit, the late nights, the stress, the regional manager breathing down everyone's neck. The audit ended on January 31st. She told me so herself, triumphantly over takeout Chinese food. "Finally done. I never want to hear the word audit again." That was 5 weeks ago. The lie sits between us in the dark like a third person in the bed. It's not the lie itself that chills me. People lie, I get that. It's how easy it was, how smooth. She didn't hesitate, didn't stumble. Didn't even bother to invent something creative. She just reached for the first plausible excuse and tossed it out like pocket change because she's done it so many times now that it's automatic. That's what gets me. Not the betrayal, the automation of it. I don't cry. I want to be clear about that. I get up after she falls asleep. I go to the kitchen. I make a pot of coffee for the morning, measure the grounds, fill the water, set the timer for 5:45 a.m. like I always do. Then I sit in the living room in the dark in my armchair and I pick up the Zippo I was polishing earlier. Click-clack, the lid opens. I thumb the wheel. A small, steady flame appears, perfectly vertical in the still air. Click-clack, the lid closes, darkness, click-clack. Flame, click-clack, dark. I sit there for a long time doing this. The emotion that moves through me isn't heartbreak. Heartbreak is hot, it's dramatic. It makes you want to scream or throw things or drive somewhere fast. This isn't that. This is dislocation. Like I've been standing on solid ground for 20 years and someone just told me very calmly that the ground was never there. That I've been standing on air this whole time and the only reason I haven't fallen is because I didn't look down. Now I've looked down, click-clack. Flame, click-clack, dark. The world has tilted on its axis, and the coffee maker on the counter will beep at 5:45 a.m., and I will drive my bus route through East Baltimore, and the kids will be loud, and the traffic will be bad, and absolutely nothing will look any different from the outside. And only I will know that everything, every single thing has changed. 2 weeks later, Natalie suggests a weekend trip. "There's this casino in Delaware," she says over breakfast, scrolling through her phone. "Dover Downs, they have a package deal room buffet, $20 in free slots, could be fun." She looks up at me with this expression I recognize. It's her spontaneous face, the slightly too wide eyes, the casual shrug, except nothing about Natalie is spontaneous. She plans her outfits 3 days in advance. This trip has been rehearsed. I hate casinos. She knows I hate casinos. The noise, the cigarette smoke, the desperate people feeding machines like they're praying to plastic gods. But the part of me that's still clutching at the last thread of something, hope, habit, denial, I don't know, says yes. "Sure," I tell her. "Could be fun." The drive takes 2 hours. We listen to the radio. She sings along to a song I don't know, tapping the steering wheel. I watch the Maryland farmland flatten into Delaware, and I think about how 20 years of marriage is a long time to build something and a very short time to watch it collapse. The casino hotel room is exactly what you'd expect for $89 a night. Beige walls, a TV bolted to the dresser, a bedspread with a pattern designed to hide stains. The carpet has that deep, industrial thickness that swallows sound and probably secrets too. Dinner is at the buffet. Prime rib and crab legs and a chocolate fountain that 3 kids are sticking their fingers into. Natalie talks about a coworker, Savannah, who is apparently dating a man who still lives with his mother. She tells the story with animated outrage, like someone else's relationship dysfunction is a spectator sport. I nod in the right places. I eat my food. I'm watching her face for cracks, and she's watching mine for signs I don't suspect. We're both performing. The whole dinner is theater. Back in the room, I don't know what I expect. That maybe she'll reach for me. That maybe the trip was her way of trying to restart something. That there's a version of this story where 2 people who have been together since they were teenagers find their way back to each other in a forgettable hotel room in Delaware. She doesn't reach for me. Instead, she sits on the edge of the bed and pats the space beside her. Her face has changed. The animation from dinner is gone. She's wearing what I think of as her serious expression, chin slightly tucked, hands folded, eye contact steady. I've seen it before. It's the face she makes when she's about to return a meal at a restaurant. "Connor, can we talk?" I sit down. The bed springs creak. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she says. Her voice is soft, measured. She's using phrases I've never heard from her before: emotional bandwidth, codependency patterns, holding space. She sounds like she's reading from a pamphlet. Later, I'll learn she picked all this up from Savannah, who is apparently an amateur therapist when she's not gossiping about her coworkers' love lives. "I feel like we've become roommates," Natalie says. "Like we're just going through the motions, and I think I need some space to find myself again." Find herself, like she's been lost, like she's been wandering the aisles of our marriage looking for the exit, and I've just been standing at the register, oblivious. "What does that mean?" I ask. My voice is steady. I'm proud of that. "A trial separation." She says it like she's ordering coffee. "Just temporary, just to give us both some perspective." "Okay. I'd stay with Savannah for a while. She has a spare room, and I was thinking, it might be easier if you stayed with Elijah. Since the apartment is closer to the bank, it just makes logistical sense for me to. You want me to leave. I want us both to have space. In the apartment I pay half the rent on. Connor, this isn't about money. It's never about money until someone has to leave their home." She sighs. It's the sigh. The one that says I'm being difficult, that I'm missing the bigger picture, that I'm too focused on small, practical things to understand the grand emotional landscape she's navigating. I've heard that sigh 1,000 times. It used to make me feel inadequate. Right now, in this $89 hotel room, it makes me feel something closer to clarity. She stands up and starts packing an overnight bag. And here's the detail that seals it. The bag is already half packed. There are clothes in there I didn't see her put in. A toiletry case. A phone charger. She came here with an exit strategy. As she zips the bag, her phone buzzes on the bed. The screen lights up. I'm sitting right next to it. The notification reads, "Cedel, can't wait to have you all to myself tomorrow night. This place is too quiet without you. Time does a funny thing, it stretches. The text glows on the screen for what feels like a full minute but is probably 3 seconds. I read it twice. Cedel Charlie Delaney. Warehouse Charlie. The number I've been seeing on the phone bill for months, filed under a name designed to look like a work contact. Natalie sees me looking. Her hand shoots out and snatches the phone. Her face goes through 3 expressions in rapid succession: surprise, guilt, and then a hard, defensive blankness that settles over her features like a door slamming shut. She opens her mouth. I can see the excuse forming. I can practically watch her brain cycling through options. It's a wrong number, it's a coworker, it's out of context, you're reading into things. I don't give her the chance. No! I stand up, my knees pop. The garish casino carpet is the color of dried blood, and I stare at it for a moment before looking at her. My voice comes out calm, so calm it surprises me. You want space, you leave. I'm not abandoning my home. And tell Cedel his texts are showing up on the bedroom mirror. It doesn't even make complete sense, bedroom mirror, phone, screen, whatever. But the words land. She flinches. Actually flinches like I've thrown something. I pick up my jacket and walk out of the room. I take the elevator down to the hotel bar, which is mostly empty except for 2 guys watching a hockey game and a woman doing a crossword puzzle. I order a Budweiser. It arrives cold, sweating on the napkin. I don't drink it. I just sit there, my hands flat on the bar, and I breathe. In and out. The hockey game murmurs from the TV. One of the guys groans at a missed shot. The bartender wipes a glass. Normal sounds, normal life. Continuing on, completely indifferent to the fact that mine just split open like rotten fruit. After an hour, I drive home alone. The highway is empty. The Maryland state line passes without ceremony. I'm back in the apartment by midnight. I make tomorrow's coffee. I sit in my chair. I pick up the Zippo. Click-clack. Flame. Click-clack. Dark. I don't hire a private investigator. I don't hack into her email. I don't do anything that would look impressive in a movie. What I do is far more boring and far more effective. I pay attention. Monday morning. I call Verizon from the break room at the bus depot, sitting on a plastic chair next to a vending machine that's been temporarily out of order since 2006. Our phone plan is shared, has been for years, and they're happy to email me the detailed billing records for both lines. I print them out at the public library that afternoon, 12 pages of calls and texts going back 6 months. The number pops up immediately. It's the most frequently contacted number on Natalie's line. More than me. More than Savannah, more than her mother. Calls at lunch. Calls at 10 p.m. Calls at 6 a.m. Short texts throughout the day, dozens of them, like a constant conversation running underneath our entire life. In her contacts, the number is saved as Warehouse Charlie, hiding in plain sight, dressed up as something professional, like a wolf wearing a name tag that says accounting. I don't confront her, not yet. Instead, I drive my bus route through East Baltimore, picking up kids who are too young to understand any of this and old enough to sense when an adult is distracted. A girl in the 3rd row, maybe 10 years old, missing a front tooth, asks me if I'm okay one morning. Just tired, I tell her. My mom says that when she's sad, the girl says matter-of-factly. Then she goes back to her juice box. Kids see everything. I should know. I used to be one. On my days off, my mind works. I'm not a detective. I'm a bus driver with a high school diploma and a CDL. But I'm patient and I'm observant, and I've been underestimated my entire life by people who mistake quiet for stupid. It's the best disguise I've ever had. A week after the casino, I'm in the laundry room of our apartment building. It's a Wednesday night, and the washers are churning, and I'm sitting on a folding table reading a 3-month-old magazine about bass fishing when the door opens and Haley Stevens walks in. I know Haley the way you know any neighbor in a building like ours, nods in the hallway, held the elevator once or twice, saw her carrying groceries in the rain. She's late 20s, sharp face, dark hair cut short and practical. She carries herself like someone who's been disappointed enough times to stop being surprised by it. She starts loading a washer with the kind of military precision that suggests folding laundry is one of the few things in her life she has total control over. Each item sorted by color, each pocket checked, each zipper closed. I respect that. I don't know what makes me say it. Probably the exhaustion. Probably the fact that I haven't talked to anyone about this and the pressure has been building in my chest like steam in a pipe. Whatever the reason, I mutter mostly to myself, Lawyers, whole world runs on lawyers and nobody's better off for it. She turns and looks at me. Her expression isn't offended. It's clinical, like she's examining a specimen. I'm a paralegal, she says. And I'd argue nobody's worse off when they actually use one at the right time. A beat. But sure, let me guess, you're one of those guys who thinks he can handle everything himself and then complains when it goes sideways. I don't complain. No, you look like the type who just absorbs it. She cocks her head. That's worse, actually. We stare at each other for a moment. It's not hostile. It's honest, which is almost harder to deal with. I don't tell her the details, but something in my face must give it away because her expression softens not to sympathy but to something more useful. Recognition. She's seen this before, maybe lived it. She pulls a business card from her back pocket and holds it out. Gerald Whitmore, family law, he does discreet consultations. Free first meeting. She pauses. Facts, not feelings, that's what you need right now. I take the card. She goes back to her laundry. It's the most important conversation I've had in 20 years, and it happens between two strangers folding clothes in a basement that smells like dryer sheets and rust. 2 days later, I follow Natalie. She tells me she's going to book club. Natalie has never read a book for pleasure in her life. The closest she's gotten is the back of a cereal box. But I don't challenge it. I just wait until she leaves, count to 60, and get in my car. She drives to a steakhouse on Pratt Street, not fancy, not cheap, the kind of place where middle managers take clients they're trying to impress. I park down the block in a spot where I can see the entrance. My bus, ironically, is better for surveillance, big mirrors, high vantage point. But tonight I'm in my Honda, slouched low, feeling ridiculous and sick at the same time. She arrives first. 5 minutes later, a man pulls up in a dark green Ford Explorer with a noticeable dent in the passenger door. He's about my height but broader, carrying himself with the practiced confidence of someone who runs meetings for a living but doesn't actually decide anything. Brown hair going gray at the temples. A jacket that's a little too tight. Charles Delaney. He gets out of the Explorer. Natalie walks to meet him on the sidewalk. The kiss isn't passionate. That's what makes it worse. It's familiar. Comfortable, the kind of kiss you give someone you've been seeing long enough that the electricity has been replaced by routine. Like they've already built their own version of what Natalie and I had. Then he does something that hits me harder than the kiss. He walks to the restaurant door and opens it for her. Holds it, waits for her to pass through, then follows. The gesture is small, old-fashioned, chivalrous. And I remember vividly, like a camera flash, the last time I opened a car door for Natalie. 2 years ago, she laughed at me. "What are you, my chauffeur? Just get in, Connor." So I stopped. And now another man is doing it, and she's smiling. I sit in my Honda for 30 minutes. I don't go in, I don't make a scene. I take out the disposable camera I bought at the CVS on North Avenue and take 3 photographs of the Explorer's plates, the entrance of the restaurant, and the time on my dashboard clock. Then I drive home. Over the next week, I move like a man defusing a bomb. Every step careful, every action deliberate. I go to the bank and withdraw exactly half of our joint savings, $4,700, and open a personal account at a different branch. I take photographs of everything. The phone records, the restaurant, the foundation stain on the blouse that I put in a plastic bag and stored in my closet. I buy a cheap spiral notebook and start a log. Dates, times, observations. Every entry written in the same neat block letters I use to fill out my bus inspection reports. I'm not angry. That's the strange thing. Or maybe the anger is there, but it's buried so deep it's turned into something else. Something cold and mechanical and patient. Something that looks a lot like focus. Natalie, meanwhile, seems to sense the change. She comes home later and later, but when she's home, she's spoiling for a fight. She criticizes the way I load the dishwasher. She sighs at the TV shows I watch. She asks me with theatrical concern if I've thought about maybe seeing someone like a therapist, because I seem distant. She wants me to blow up. She wants the screaming match, the thrown dishes, the dramatic confrontation that would let her play the victim. She needs me to be the bad guy in her story because as long as I'm the cold, emotionally unavailable husband, she's the neglected wife who was driven into another man's arms. It's a script, and she needs me to read my lines. I refuse. One night, she pushes harder than usual. She's standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, listing everything wrong with our life, The apartment is too small, we never go anywhere, I'm content to just exist. I have no ambition, no vision. She's working herself up to something, her voice rising, her eyes bright with manufactured frustration. I'm standing at the counter, putting dishes away. I wait for her to pause for breath, and then I say it, calmly, like I'm reading a weather report. I know about Charlie. 3 words, the kitchen goes silent. The refrigerator hums. Her mouth opens, closes, opens again. I watch the denial assembling itself behind her eyes, the shocked expression, the confused head tilt, the Charlie who? That's already forming on her lips. I cut her off before she can start. I don't care to discuss the details. You made your choice. We'll discuss the consequences through lawyers. I put the last dish in the cabinet. I close the door. I walk past her to the living room. She stands in the kitchen for a long time, not moving. I can feel her trying to process the fact that the script just got rewritten and she doesn't have her lines anymore. That night she sleeps on the couch. Or doesn't sleep, I hear her pacing, making quiet phone calls at 2 a.m. I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosens, just slightly. Not because the situation is better, but because the pretending is over. The truth is ugly, but at least it's solid ground. Within a week, Natalie is gone. Not dramatically, no screaming exit, no slamming doors. She packs 2 suitcases on a Saturday afternoon while I'm at the depot picking up extra shifts. When I come home, the closet is half empty and the bathroom counter has gaps where her things used to be. Shampoo, moisturizer, the hairdryer, all gone. The ceramic ring dish is still by the sink, empty like a tiny abandoned house. She texts me that evening, staying with Savannah. I think this is best for now. We can talk when you're ready to be reasonable. Reasonable. There's a word doing a lot of heavy lifting. I call Gerald Whitmore the next Monday. His office is on the 2nd floor of a tired building near the courthouse, the kind of place where the elevator makes sounds that suggest it's actively negotiating with gravity. Whitmore himself is a compact man in his 60s with reading glasses on a chain and a handshake like a vice grip. Haley is there too at a desk in the corner, surrounded by folders. She gives me a nod, just a nod, but it steadies me. The consultation takes an hour. I lay out everything, the phone records, the photos, the foundation stain, the notebook. Whitmore goes through it all with the same methodical attention I give my bus inspections. When he's done, he takes off his glasses and rubs the bridge of his nose. This is solid work, Mr. Murphy. Not enough for a criminal case. We're not talking criminal, but for a fault-based divorce in Maryland, this gives us real ground. He explains the options. Maryland recognizes adultery as grounds for divorce. It affects alimony calculations, property division, the whole picture. He's not flashy about it. He's not promising victory. He's just laying out the terrain, and I appreciate that more than I can say. We file the papers the following week. Divorce petition, fault-based, citing adultery. Straightforward, seeking an equitable split of assets. No tricks, no games. Just the facts, arranged in legal language, served to Natalie at Savannah's apartment on a Thursday afternoon. I hear about her reaction secondhand from Elijah, who heard it from his cousin who works at the same bank. Apparently, Natalie read the papers in the break room and went white. Then red. Then she called her mother. Then she called me, I didn't answer, and left a voicemail that was 7 minutes of fury compressed into fragments. The word she keeps returning to is humiliating. Not the affair, not the lies, the fact that the papers say adultery. In writing, in a legal document, she's not ashamed of what she did. She's ashamed of being caught, which is a very different thing. Life after that settles into a strange new pattern. The apartment is quieter than it's ever been. I come home from my roots to silence, and at first the silence feels like an accusation, like the apartment itself is asking what went wrong. But gradually it starts to feel like something else. Not comfort, exactly, more like room to breathe. I see Charles Delaney for the first time 3 weeks after the filing. It's a Sunday morning. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, looking out the window at the parking lot because that's what passes for a view in this building. A dark green Ford Explorer pulls in, same dent in the passenger door, impossible to miss. Natalie climbs out of the passenger side, grabs a box from the back seat. She's here for some of her things. We arranged this through lawyers, specific time window, no direct contact. Charles is behind the wheel. He doesn't get out. But he looks up at the building, scanning the windows, and his eyes find mine. We make eye contact through 3 floors of air and glass. He looks away first. Quick, like he touched something hot. I sip my coffee. There's something deeply pathetic about him in that moment, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it literally. It evokes pathos. Here's a man in a dented SUV, waiting for another man's wife to collect her belongings from another man's apartment, and he can't even hold eye contact with the man he wronged. Whatever fantasy he built in his head about this situation, whatever story he told himself, the neglected woman, the loveless marriage, the noble rescue, is sitting in a parking lot at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, and it looks a lot less romantic in daylight. The weeks grind on. The legal process is slow, expensive, and exhausting in the way that only bureaucracy can be. Emails from lawyers. Responses to emails from lawyers. Responses to responses. Meanwhile, the real world continues. I drive my routes, pick up kids, navigate construction on Eastern Avenue, and try to remember to eat dinner. Elijah comes over on Wednesday nights. He brings beer and we watch whatever game is on. He doesn't ask about the divorce unless I bring it up, which I rarely do. He just sits there, solid and present, a man-shaped reminder that not everything in my life has turned to ash. One Wednesday, he breaks his silence. You doing okay? Yeah. You eating? Yeah. You lying? A little. He nods, opens another beer, and that's the entire conversation. It's the most comforting thing anyone has said to me in months. Through the grapevine, which in this case means Savannah talking to Elijah's cousin talking to Elijah talking to me. A chain of gossip as reliable as a game of telephone and about as precise. I learn things. Charles Delaney is not living his best life. The fantasy of running off with a married woman has collided headfirst with the reality of actually being with her. Natalie, freed from the constraints of a marriage she considered suffocating, has apparently bloomed into her fullest self, and her fullest self is a lot to handle. She rearranged Charles's apartment twice. She threw out his couch because it smelled like his ex-wife. She's been calling his ex-wife directly, which is going about as well as you'd expect. His kids, who already had complicated feelings about the divorce, now refuse to visit. His alimony and child support payments, already stretching his warehouse supervisor's salary to the breaking point, leave no room for the lifestyle Natalie believes she deserves. Savannah, who likes to talk the way some people like to breathe, tells anyone who will listen that Natalie and Charles fight constantly. Loud, ugly fights about money and respect, and the dishes, and all the same small, grinding disagreements that make up every relationship, except without the 20 years of investment that makes you try to work through them. I absorb all of this the way I absorb everything, quietly, without visible reaction. I file it away in the same part of my brain where I keep bus routes and phone records and the exact shade of foundation that didn't belong on my wife's collar. Then comes the Tuesday. It's March. Cold rain, the kind Baltimore specializes in, not dramatic enough to be a storm, just relentless, soaking gray. I'm in the apartment, working on a stuck lighter, a 1953 Zippo with a town and country engraving, beautiful piece, but the flint wheel is gunked up. I've got it disassembled on a towel, tiny parts arranged like a surgical patient's organs, and I'm cleaning each one with a cotton swab dipped in lighter fluid. Knock, knock, knock. Frantic. Not the knock of a delivery driver or a neighbor asking for sugar. This is the knock of someone who needs something badly. I put down the swab, wipe my hands on a rag, and open the door. It's not Natalie. Charles Delaney is standing in my hallway, soaking wet, no umbrella, his jacket dark with rain. He looks like he's aged 10 years since I saw him in the parking lot. His eyes are red-rimmed from crying, from drinking, from sleeplessness, maybe all three. His hair is plastered to his forehead. He's breathing hard like he ran up the stairs. For a moment, neither of us speaks. The hallway smells like wet carpet and someone's microwave dinner. Water drips from Charles's jacket onto the floor in a small, steady rhythm. Then the words start and they come out in a rush, tumbling over each other like they've been trapped inside him for weeks and the door just broke. Murphy, please, you have to take her back. I blink. Or just talk to her, make her stop. She's a force of nature, man. I can't. She spent half my savings redecorating my apartment. Half in 6 weeks. She's on the phone with my ex-wife, screaming at her, and now Diane won't let the kids come at all, not even on video. She shows up at my warehouse with lunch, tells my supervisor we're in love, introduces herself to my crew like she's the queen of the loading dock. My boss pulled me aside and told me to get my personal life together. She opened a credit card in my name, said it was for us, for building our life, and there's $11,000 on it that I didn't even know about until the statement came. He's shaking, not from the cold, from something deeper. She's destroyed my life, he says. The bravado is gone. The mid-level management confidence, the man who opened car doors and sent confident late-night texts, all of it has been stripped away, and what's left is a guy standing in a puddle of his own rainwater, begging the husband of the woman he stole for mercy. I just wanted, he trails off, swallows hard. I didn't know she was like this. I look at him for a long moment. The man who kissed my wife on a sidewalk outside a steakhouse. The man whose name I found on phone bills at 6 a.m. The man who texted, "Can't wait to have you all to myself," while I sat 3 feet away. Here he is. Not a villain, not a triumphant rival, just a broken, desperate, middle-aged man in wet shoes asking a bus driver to save him from the consequences of his own choices. Something rises in my chest. It might be satisfaction, it might be pity. It might be both, twisted together so tightly I can't tell where one ends and the other begins. I look down at his shoes. They're leaving marks on the hallway carpet. "Come in," I say. "Take off your wet shoes." He stares at me. The ordinariness of the instruction, the sheer mundane hospitality of it, throws him completely. He was ready for a fist, ready for a slammed door. He was not ready for a man calmly asking him to remove his shoes. He bends down, unties his shoes, and steps inside. I close the door behind him. On the counter, the disassembled Zippo sits on its towel, each piece in its place, waiting patiently to be made whole again. Charles Delaney sat on my couch like a man who just survived a car wreck and wasn't sure all his parts were still attached. His socks were mismatched, one black, one dark navy. His wet jacket dripped onto the armrest, and I thought about saying something but decided against it. The man had driven across Baltimore in a rainstorm to beg his mistress's husband for help. A damp armrest was the least of anyone's problems. I poured 2 glasses of Old Crow from the bottle I kept above the fridge, not because I wanted to drink with him. Because a man with a glass in his hand talks more than a man with empty fists. I learned that driving a bus full of teenagers, give them something to hold, a phone, a snack, whatever, and the chaos drops by half. I handed him the glass. He took it with both hands like it was something precious. His fingers were trembling. "Start from the beginning," I said. I sat in my armchair across from him. The disassembled Zippo was still on the counter behind me, each tiny piece laid out on its towel. Waiting. Charles took a gulp of whiskey, winced, took another. "It started in June," he said. "Last June, she came into the warehouse to dispute a delivery charge for the bank, some office furniture order that got billed wrong. I handled it because that's what I do. I handle customer issues." June, I did the math, 9 months before the casino trip. 9 months of phone calls at 6 a.m. and foundation smears and clove cigarette smoke while I polished my lighters and made the morning coffee. I kept my face neutral. She was, you know how she is. He looked at me, then looked away fast, realizing the stupidity of that sentence. "I mean, she's charming." She laughed at my jokes. She came back the next week with another billing question that I'm pretty sure she made up. And then we got coffee. And then, "I don't need the love story, Charlie." He flinched at the name. "Good. Right, okay." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Look, she told me the marriage was over. She said you two hadn't been together in years. She said you were basically strangers living in the same apartment. She said she was suffocating. She said a lot of things." "Yeah." He stared into the whiskey. "Yeah, she did." The rain hammered against the window. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's TV was playing a laugh track, some sitcom, muffled through the walls, the sound of people pretending to be happy. "Tell me about the money," I said. That's when the dam broke. It came out in pieces, disjointed, circling back on itself the way confessions always do when a person hasn't organized their guilt yet. The credit card was the big one. Natalie had opened a Visa in his name. She had his social security number, his date of birth, everything you need. She told him it was a joint card for household expenses. He didn't question it because he was still in the fog of new love, that narcotic stage where red flags look like streamers. $11,400, Charles said. The number came out precise, the way numbers do when you've stared at a statement long enough to memorize it. Furniture, clothes. A spa weekend I didn't even know about until the bill hit. She redecorated my entire living room, threw out my couch, my coffee table, a recliner my dad gave me, said they were bachelor garbage. Sounds like Natalie. He looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, that I wasn't angrier. Or recognition, the slow, awful realization that I knew this woman in ways he was only beginning to understand. There's more, he said. She quit her job. Now that was new. As of 2 weeks ago, the gossip chain had Natalie still employed at the bank. When, last Friday, she told her manager the work environment was hostile and triggering. Walked out in the middle of a shift. Didn't give notice. He rubbed his face with both hands. She told me she did it for us so she could focus on building our life together, and that I should support her while she figures out her true passion. What's her true passion? I have no idea. Last week it was interior design. This week she's talking about becoming a life coach. He laughed, a broken, airless sound. A life coach. She can't manage her own life and she wants to coach other people through theirs. I sipped my whiskey. It burned going down cheap and honest. She calls my ex-wife, Charles continued. Diane, she calls her and tells her that I've moved on and that Diane needs to accept reality. Diane has a lawyer now. She's filing to increase child support because Natalie's living with me and, quote, clearly contributing to an improved household income. Except Natalie doesn't have income anymore. She just has my credit card. Your kids, his face crumbled. Not all at once, it happened in stages like a building coming down floor by floor. First the jaw tightened. Then the eyes filled. Then the forehead collapsed into deep lines, and he looked like exactly what he was. A 41-year-old man who traded his family for a fantasy and was now watching the fantasy eat him alive. They won't talk to me, he whispered. My daughter is 14. She saw Natalie's Facebook posts, pictures of my apartment with the new furniture, captions about new beginnings and choosing happiness. My daughter called me and said, "You replaced us with new stuff, Dad." Then she hung up. That was 3 weeks ago. She hasn't returned a call since. The apartment was quiet except for the rain. I thought about that for a while. I thought about a 14-year-old girl looking at pictures of her father's new life with a woman who threw out her grandfather's recliner. I thought about how betrayal isn't a single act. It's a stone dropped in water, and the ripples keep going until they hit shores you can't even see. She shows up at my warehouse, Charles said, filling the silence because silence was clearly something he couldn't handle anymore. Brings me lunch in front of my crew, tells my supervisor, my direct supervisor, Murphy, that we're building a future together. She introduced herself as my partner to the regional VP during a site visit last week. The guy looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Have you told her to leave? Every day, she cries, then she screams. Then she tells me I'm just like Connor, no offense, that I don't appreciate her, that I'm emotionally unavailable, that she gave up everything for me. He set the glass down on the coffee table, missed the coaster by an inch. Then she apologizes, makes dinner, acts like nothing happened. And the cycle starts again the next morning. I recognized that cycle. I'd lived inside a quieter version of it for years, the criticism, the guilt trip, the reset. The difference was that I'd been the frog in the pot, adjusting to the slowly rising temperature. Charles had been dropped into boiling water all at once, and he was scalded. I need her gone, Charles said. I'll pay you. Whatever you want, cash, I can pull together maybe 2,000. Just take her back or talk to her or something, please. I leaned back in my chair. The springs creaked. On the counter, the pieces of the Zippo caught the kitchen light, the small brass cam, the flint wheel, the chimney. Each piece insignificant alone. Together they made fire. I don't want your money, Charlie. Then what do you want? I let the question hang for a moment. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere on Eastern Avenue, fading into the distance. I want a signed statement, I said. An affidavit, written out, detailed, notarized, the timeline of the affair, when it started, who initiated contact, how it progressed. I want you to include what she told you about our marriage, the things she said to justify it. I want the financial details, the credit card, the spending, the job she quit, all of it from your perspective in your words. For what? For my lawyer. Charles went pale. Whatever color the whiskey had put back in his face drained out again. I could get in trouble, legally. If I admit to the affair in writing. Charlie. I kept my voice mild, conversational, the same tone I use when a kid on my bus is about to do something stupid and I need them to reconsider without making it a confrontation. You came to my apartment. You sat on my couch. You drank my whiskey. You told me everything. I didn't come looking for you. You knocked on my door. He swallowed. Now I can help you, I continued. The affidavit helps my divorce. A clean divorce means Natalie becomes my problem to resolve legally, not yours to endure indefinitely. You help me, I help you. Simple transaction. And if I say no? I picked up my phone from the side table, held it loosely the way you hold a tool you might or might not use. Then I call Natalie right now. Tell her you're sitting in my living room on my couch, offering me money to take her off your hands. The color that had drained from his face didn't come back. If anything, he went a shade closer to gray. How do you think she'll take that, Charlie? The woman who quit her job for you, who told your boss you're in love, who calls your ex-wife to stake her claim, how's she going to react when she finds out you drove across town in the rain to beg her ex-husband for help? He didn't answer. He didn't need to, we both knew. I'll do it, he said quietly. The affidavit, I'll do it. Good. I stood up, took his glass, and rinsed both glasses in the sink. Normal, mundane motions, dishwashing. My lawyer's name is Gerald Whitmore. His office is on Lexington Street, 2nd floor. Call tomorrow after 9. His paralegal will walk you through the format. His paralegal? Haley Stevens. She lives down the hall. Charles stood, looking dazed. He picked up his wet shoes from the mat by the door, holding them like he'd forgotten how shoes worked. Murphy? Yeah. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at him. The apology was real. I could see that. It wasn't performance or strategy. It was the raw, graceless remorse of a man who'd broken something he couldn't fix and was only now understanding the full scope of the damage. I know, I said. Go home, Charlie. He left. The door clicked shut. The hallway was silent. I stood there for a minute, then walked to the counter and looked at the disassembled Zippo. The flint wheel was clean now. The cam was oiled, every piece ready. I started putting it back together. Haley knocked on my door the next evening. She was still in her work clothes, dark blazer, no-nonsense flats, hair pulled back tight. She had a legal pad under her arm and the expression of someone who'd just been told Christmas was coming early. Tell me everything, she said, walking past me into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. She pulled out a chair, sat down, uncapped a pen. And don't leave out the part where he cried. I want the full picture. I told her, all of it. The credit card fraud, the quitting her job, the harassment of Charles's ex-wife, the scenes at his workplace, the offer of money. She wrote fast, her handwriting sharp and angular, filling pages. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me across the table. This is a goldmine, she said. The credit card alone, opening a card in someone else's name, is fraud, Connor. That's not a civil matter, that's criminal. She won't want that anywhere near a courtroom. So we're in good shape. We're in better shape. She tapped the pen against the pad. But better isn't one. The affidavit gives us leverage. The timeline corroborates your evidence, but Natalie is going to fight. She's going to fight because she has no other options, and people with no options are dangerous. What do you suggest? She leaned forward. We don't rush. We let the pressure build. She's hemorrhaging money, she's burning relationships, and she's making enemies out of everyone around her. Every day that passes, our position gets stronger and hers gets weaker. But she held up a finger. You cannot get emotional. You cannot feel sorry for her. You cannot let her back in, not even for a conversation. She will try. She will cry. She will tell you she still loves you. And if you open that door even a crack, she'll use it to tear everything apart. I won't. I've heard that before. She studied my face. From men who meant it right up until the moment they didn't. I'm not those men. She held my gaze for a long beat. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded once, picked up her pen, and flipped to a clean page. All right, Murphy, let's build this thing. 2 weeks later, Connor's lawyer sent Natalie a revised settlement offer. It was Gerald Whitmore's idea, a carefully constructed piece of bait. The offer dropped the formal adultery accusation from the public filing. In exchange, Natalie would relinquish any claim to Connor's city pension and his personal property, including the lighter collection. On paper, it looked like a concession, a peace offering from a man tired of fighting. In reality, it was a test. She'll reject it, Whitmore told Connor over the phone. But we need her rejection on record. It establishes a pattern. We offered reasonable terms. She refused. That matters when a judge looks at who's been negotiating in good faith. He was right. Natalie's response came through her new attorney, a man named Victor Sable, whose office was on the top floor of a glass building in the Inner Harbor, and whose website featured a photo of himself leaning against a Jaguar. He specialized in high-asset divorces, which meant he was wildly overqualified for a case involving a bus driver and a bank teller, and wildly overpriced for a client who just quit her only source of income. Sable's counterdemand was breathtaking in its audacity. 60% of all marital assets, half of Connor's future pension, monthly alimony of $1,200, and Connor to assume responsibility for Natalie's legal fees. The letter also introduced a new claim, emotional abandonment, alleging that Connor's cold and withholding nature had created an environment of psychological distress that drove Natalie to seek comfort elsewhere. Haley read the letter aloud to Connor in the laundry room because that had become their unofficial war room, neutral ground, white noise from the machines, no one around at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. Emotional abandonment, she said flatly. That's Sable's move. He's trying to reframe the narrative. She's not the cheater anymore, she's the victim of a neglectful husband. Can that work? In front of the right judge with the right performance? Maybe. In front of any judge who sees the phone records, the photos, and an affidavit from the man she was sleeping with? Not a chance. She folded the letter and handed it back. But here's what matters. Sable charges $400 an hour. She can't afford him. She's living on what's left of Charlie's patience and whatever cash she had saved. Every motion he files, every response he demands, every meeting he schedules, it's money she doesn't have. So we slow things down. We slow things down. And they did. Every filing got a carefully timed extension request. Every discovery document was delivered on the last possible day. Every communication went through proper channels, formal and polite and glacially slow. Whitmore was a master of legal patience. He'd been practicing family law in Baltimore for 30 years, and he understood that sometimes the most devastating weapon in a divorce wasn't evidence. It was time. Meanwhile, Natalie's world was contracting. The gossip chain, which Connor had learned to treat as intelligence rather than noise, delivered updates in fragments. Savannah told Elijah's cousin that Natalie and Charles were fighting every night. Loud fights. The kind where neighbors knocked on the wall. Charles had started sleeping on his own couch, the replacement couch that Natalie had bought with his credit card, which must have added a special flavor of bitterness to the experience. Natalie, now unemployed and increasingly anxious, had apparently pivoted from finding her true passion to demanding that Charles increase his contribution to their shared expenses. Charles, whose take-home pay was already carved up between rent, alimony, child support, and the minimum payments on the credit card Natalie had maxed out, had nothing left to give. Then came the lawsuit from Diane. Charles's ex-wife filed a motion to increase child support, citing his new domestic partnership as evidence of a dual-income household. The legal logic was simple. If Charles had a live-in partner, the household's combined resources had increased, and the children deserved a larger share. The fact that this partner had no income and was actively draining his savings was irrelevant to the filing. The optics were what mattered, and the optics were devastating. Connor heard about the fallout from Elijah, who delivered the news with the same flat, unimpressed tone he used to describe most things. They were in Connor's apartment on a Wednesday night, ball game on TV. Elijah had his boots off and a beer in his hand, and he'd been silent for a full inning before he spoke. "Saw your wife's boyfriend today." Connor looked over. "Where?" "Giant on Eastern Avenue. I was picking up laundry detergent. He was in the parking lot having a screaming match with her, right there between the shopping carts and somebody's minivan." "What happened?" Elijah took a slow drink. "He threw a suitcase out of his truck, told her it was done. She was crying. He was yelling something about his kids. Then he got in the Explorer and peeled out. Left her standing there with the suitcase and a cart full of groceries nobody was going to pay for." "What did you do?" "Bought my detergent, went home." Connor almost smiled, almost. "She's gonna come for you now," Elijah said, eyes on the TV. She's got nowhere else to go. Charlie's done. Savannah's done. I heard she told Natalie to find somewhere else last week. The only thing left is the divorce money. I know. You ready for that? Connor thought about the Zippo on the counter, the pieces reassembled, the hinge tight, the flame clean, everything back in its place. Yeah, he said, I'm ready. Elijah nodded. They watched the rest of the game in silence. He was right, of course. With Charles gone and Savannah's hospitality exhausted, Natalie's options collapsed to a single point: the divorce settlement. It was the only potential source of money she had left, and she clung to it with the desperation of someone gripping a ledge. Victor Sable, sensing that his client was broke and his fee was in jeopardy, pushed harder. New motions filed. Discovery requests for Connor's complete employment records. A demand for a financial evaluation of the Zippo collection, as if a box of vintage lighters was a hidden portfolio of assets. Every move was designed to squeeze, to pressure, to make Connor's life difficult enough that he'd settle high just to make it stop. But Connor didn't squeeze. He'd spent 20 years on a bus route through East Baltimore, navigating potholes and construction and kids who threw things and parents who screamed at him over stops that were 30 seconds late. He knew how to absorb pressure. He knew how to keep his hands steady on the wheel when everything outside the windshield was chaos. He went to work. He drove his routes. He came home, ate dinner, and worked on the jukebox he'd found at a thrift store on Greenmount, a 1958 Seeburg that was missing its coin mechanism and had a cracked selection panel, but the turntable still spun and the amplifier hummed when you plugged it in. It was a project, a puzzle, something with broken parts that could be made to work again if you were patient enough. 2 months passed. Natalie was living in a weekly rate motel off Route 40. Connor knew this because Whitmore's office received her updated address for service of documents, and the address was the Starlight Motor Lodge, which was the kind of place that offered free HBO and a microwave in every room and asked no questions about how long you planned to stay. The board was set. The pieces were moving. And then on a Thursday evening, right on schedule, Natalie came back. She didn't knock the way Charles had: frantic, desperate, rain-soaked. Natalie knocked softly. 3 gentle taps, the kind you'd use on a hospital room door when you weren't sure the patient was awake. Connor was at the kitchen table, sanding the cracked faceplate of the Seeburg jukebox. He'd spread newspaper across the surface and was working a fine grit sandpaper in slow, even strokes, smoothing out decades of scratches. Dust coated his fingertips. The apartment smelled like sawdust and the leftover coffee in the pot. 3 soft taps. He knew who it was before he opened the door. He'd been expecting her for 2 weeks, ever since Haley sat him down and walked him through the scenario like a chess player explaining the next 5 moves. She's out of options, Haley had said. Charlie's gone. Savannah kicked her out, her lawyers threatening to drop her if she can't make a payment. The only move she has left is you. What kind of move? Reconciliation. Or the performance of it. Haley had leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. She'll come to you crying. She'll talk about your history, your real love, the 20 years. She'll blame Charlie for seducing her. She'll blame her midlife crisis. She'll blame everything except herself, and she'll make you believe, or try to make you believe, that she wants you back. She doesn't want me back. No, she wants the stability you represent, the apartment, the routine, the pension. She wants a base of operations to regroup, and once she's back inside, she'll use the reconciliation to kill the adultery claim. We tried to work it out, Your Honor. He's the one who refused. It flips the narrative. So what do I do? Haley had smiled, not warm, strategic. You let her in. Now here she was. I opened the door, and the woman standing in the hallway was someone I almost didn't recognize. Not because she looked different, she looked exactly like Natalie. Same face, same posture, same way of holding her purse with both hands when she was nervous. But the energy was wrong. The confidence was gone. The woman who'd told me I could crash with Elijah while she moved her boyfriend into our marriage was nowhere in sight. In her place was someone smaller, diminished, wearing makeup that wasn't quite blended under her left eye like she'd applied it in the rearview mirror of a car parked under a bad light. Hi, Connor. Natalie. Can I come in? Just to talk. I won't stay long. I stepped aside. She walked in and stopped in the middle of the living room, looking around at the space she'd lived in for 17 years. Her eyes caught the jukebox in the corner, new, something she didn't recognize, and the empty spaces where her things used to be. The shelf where her books had been was now holding the Seaberg's spare parts in labeled containers. "You've been busy," she said, "keeping myself occupied." She sat on the couch. I sat in the armchair. The same positions Charles and I had occupied weeks earlier, though she didn't know that. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. The same sounds as always. Then Natalie started crying. Quiet crying, not performative. Or at least it was a masterful imitation of the real thing. Her shoulders shook. She pressed her fingers to her temples, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet and red and full of something that looked very much like genuine pain. "I made a terrible mistake," she said. "The worst mistake of my life, I know that. I know what I did, and I know I can't undo it, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses." She paused, took a breath, steadied herself. "But we had 20 years, Connor, 20 years. That has to mean something. We were kids when we got together. We built a life, and I threw it away because I was lost. I was unhappy and I didn't know how to say it, and Charlie was there, and he made me feel like I wasn't invisible. But it was a lie, all of it. He didn't love me. He didn't even know me." She looked at me with an expression that was perfectly calibrated, vulnerable but not pathetic, remorseful but not groveling. Even now, even at her lowest, Natalie was performing. And the performance was good. It was very, very good. "I still love you," she said. "I know you probably don't believe that, but I do, and I'm begging for a chance to prove it." I let the silence stretch. Counted to 10 in my head the way Haley had coached me. Don't respond too quickly. Don't look eager. Don't look cold. Look conflicted. Look like a man who wants to believe but is afraid to. "It's hard to trust," I said slowly. My voice cracked slightly, not faked exactly, but not suppressed either. "After everything, the lawyers, the accusations, it's all gotten so hostile. I know it has, and that's my fault. Victor, my attorney, he pushed me into things I didn't want to do. The emotional abandonment claim, the pension demand, that wasn't me, Connor, that was him. He's aggressive and I was scared and I let him drive. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie because Haley had pulled the filing records and every motion had Natalie's signature on the instruction sheet. She hadn't been pushed into anything. She'd led the charge, but I nodded, slowly, like I was considering it. "If we were going to try again," I said, "really try, I'd need to feel safe. You understand that, right? I'd need to know that if things didn't work out, I wouldn't lose everything. My home, my pension, the things I've worked my whole life for." Of course, Connor, whatever you need." My lawyer mentioned something, a post-nuptial agreement. It's like a prenup, but for people who are already married. It would protect certain assets, the apartment, my pension, my personal things, in case things went wrong again. I swallowed, looked at my hands. "I know it sounds cold, but I need that security to open my heart again. Does that make sense?" She was quiet for a moment. I could feel her calculating behind the tears, running the math, what the document might mean, what she'd be giving up, what she'd be gaining. A roof over her head. An exit from the Starlight Motor Lodge. A warm apartment with a full kitchen and a man who made coffee every morning and never raised his voice. "If that's what you need," she said softly, "then I'll sign it. You should probably have your lawyer look at it first. I don't need Victor to tell me what I already know." She reached across the gap between the couch and the armchair and put her hand on my knee. Her fingers were cold. "I know this is right. I can feel it." I covered her hand with mine. A gesture I'd made 1,000 times over 20 years. Muscle memory so deep it barely required thought. And somewhere underneath the strategy and the calculation and Haley's coaching, a part of me, the part that remembered her at 19, laughing in the rain outside a movie theater, stealing fries off my plate at a diner, falling asleep on my shoulder during long drives, felt something twist. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then it passed. "I'll have Gerald draw it up," I said. Something simple, straightforward. "Okay. Give me a few days." She squeezed my hand, smiled, a real smile or the ghost of one, I couldn't tell anymore, and maybe it didn't matter. "Thank you, Connor. Thank you for not giving up on us." She left. The door closed. The apartment was silent again. I stood in the kitchen for a full minute, not moving. Then I picked up my phone and called Haley. She answered on the second ring. "She signed?" "Not yet. She agreed to sign. I need the document." "Whitmore drafted it yesterday. It's ready." A pause. "How was it?" I thought about the cold fingers on my knee, the calculation behind the tears, the girl at the movie theater who didn't exist anymore. "It was fine," I said. "Send the document." The signing happened 2 days later. Natalie came to the apartment on a Saturday morning. She was dressed nicely, not overdone, but put together like someone going to a job interview. She smelled like the perfume she used to wear when we were dating before she switched to something more expensive. I noticed. I noticed everything. That was my curse and lately my advantage. The postnuptial agreement was 4 pages. Whitmore had written it in language that was clear but dense enough that a layperson would need to read it twice to catch the implications. The core provisions were simple. In the event of a future divorce, Connor's city pension, the apartment lease, and all personal property acquired before the marriage would be excluded from marital asset division. Natalie would retain rights to any assets acquired independently during the marriage. The trap was in what the document didn't say. It didn't mention the adultery claim. It didn't reference the existing divorce proceedings. By signing a postnuptial that contemplated a future divorce, Natalie was implicitly acknowledging the possibility of dissolution while simultaneously surrendering her claim to the 2 assets her lawyer had been pursuing most aggressively, the pension and the apartment. Natalie read the first page, skimmed the second, glanced at the third and fourth. "This seems fair," she said. I tried to keep it simple. She picked up the pen, a cheap Bic blue ink. The kind of pen you find in a kitchen drawer, not the kind you sign life-altering documents with. But that was the whole point, nothing dramatic, nothing that signaled importance, just a pen, a document, and a Saturday morning. She signed, dated it, pushed it across the table. "There," she said, "clean slate." I nodded. Took the document, placed it in a manila folder. "I need a week," I said, "to process, to think about what comes next. Is that okay?" "Of course." She stood, smoothed her skirt. "Take all the time you need, I'll be here." She meant it as a comfort. It landed as a threat, though she didn't know it. I walked her to the door. She paused in the doorway, turned back, and for a moment she looked at me with something that might have been real hope, real longing, real belief that this was going to work. Or maybe it was just the last performance of a woman who'd been performing so long she'd forgotten how to stop. "I miss this apartment," she said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "It's a good apartment." She left. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, walked to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and took a photograph of the signed document, every page, front and back. Then I scanned it using the printer in the bedroom and emailed it to Haley and Whitmore with a subject line that read, "Executed, all 4 pages." Haley's reply came in under a minute. "Beautiful, don't change anything, don't call her. Don't text her, radio silence starting now. We move forward on Monday." I set the phone down. The manila folder sat on the kitchen table, the blue ink of Natalie's signature still fresh. On the counter, the 1953 Zippo, fully reassembled, cleaned, oiled, and whole, caught the afternoon light through the window. I picked it up. Click-clack, flame, steady, reliable. A small fire, perfectly controlled. The call came on a Wednesday. I was at the depot doing my post-route inspection, tire pressure, mirrors, fluid levels, the same checklist I'd done 1,000 times. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Whitmore's office number. "Mr. Murphy, we have a development." Whitmore's voice was its usual calm, but there was something underneath it, a current of energy I hadn't heard before. "Mrs. Murphy's attorney has been in contact." "Sable?" "Mr. Sable is no longer representing your wife. He withdrew from the case yesterday." I leaned against the side of the bus. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun. Across the lot, 2 other drivers were talking near the break room, their voices a low murmur. "Why?" "Officially, professional differences." "Unofficially, and this comes from a colleague who shares office space with Sable's paralegal. Your wife failed to make her last 2 retainer payments. And when Sable reviewed the postnuptial she signed, he told her, in rather colorful language, that she'd surrendered her primary leverage, and that he couldn't continue to pursue a strategy built on claims she'd already signed away." "How did she take it?" "From what I understand, not well." That was an understatement. The voicemails started that evening. The first one came at 6:14 p.m. while I was heating up leftover pasta. My phone lit up, Natalie. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, her voice was shaking, a mixture of rage and disbelief that vibrated through the tinny phone speaker like a guitar string wound too tight. "You set me up. You sat there in that apartment and you looked me in the eye and you set me up like I was nothing. Like 20 years meant nothing. You're sick, Connor. You're a sick, manipulative, cold-hearted." The message cut off at the 3-minute mark. The second one started immediately. I trusted you. I came to you because I thought we could fix this. And you had that document ready. You had it ready, didn't you? You and that lawyer and that little paralegal down the hall, you planned the whole thing. You sat there and held my hand, and it was all a lie. Third message, 6:32 p.m. This one was quieter, which made it worse. I gave you everything, Connor, 20 years, my youth, my best years, and this is what I get, a trick, a trap. You couldn't even face me like a man, you had to use a piece of paper. Fourth message, 7:15 p.m. The tears were gone. What replaced them was flat, hard, stripped of performance. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are, your boss, your coworkers, everyone. Fifth, sixth, seventh, they blurred together, some screaming, some sobbing, some eerily calm. I saved every single one. Haley came by at 9. I played them for her on speakerphone while she sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad taking notes. Her face didn't change expression through any of them. When the last one finished, she set down her pen. How many total? 11 between 6 and 9 tonight. Any explicit threats? Number 4, she says she's going to contact my employer. Haley nodded slowly. Save them, all of them. Back them up to your email. And starting now, you do not answer her calls, you do not respond to texts, you do not open the door if she shows up. She's going to show up. I know she is. It happened 3 days later. A Saturday. I was home, working on the jukebox. I'd found a replacement coin mechanism on eBay and was trying to wire it into the Seeburg's original harness. Careful work, small wires, soldering iron hot enough to burn if you flinched. The kind of work that required steady hands and full concentration. At 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Darren Webb, the depot shift supervisor. Hey, Murphy, your wife is here at the depot. She's in the parking lot asking for you. Tony tried to tell her you're not scheduled today, and she started yelling. Just giving you a heads up. A second text 2 minutes later, she's in the front office now. Linda's trying to calm her down. She's saying she needs to talk to your supervisor about your character. What do you want us to do? I called Darren. How bad? She's loud, man. She's telling Linda you're a liar and a con artist, and she wants to talk to someone in charge about what kind of person they have driving kids around. Linda looked like she wanted to crawl under her desk. Tony's standing by the door in case it escalates. Is she threatening anyone? Not directly, but she's not leaving either. We're about 3 minutes from somebody calling the cops. Let them call. A pause. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. The police report was brief and bureaucratic. Officers responded to a disturbance at the Baltimore City Public Schools Transportation Depot. A woman identified as Natalie Murphy was found in the front office in an agitated state, making accusations against an employee. She was asked to leave. She refused. She was escorted off the premises. No arrest was made, but a report was filed. I picked up a copy of the report on Monday. By Tuesday, Haley and I were sitting in Whitmore's office filing for a temporary restraining order. The petition was clean and clinical, built on evidence that Natalie had spent weeks assembling for us without knowing it. The voicemails, transcribed, time-stamped, attached as exhibits. The depot incident police report included a pattern of escalating harassment, documented not through surveillance or suspicion, but through Natalie's own recorded words and actions. The hearing was brief. A family court commissioner reviewed the petition, listened to 2 of the voicemails. Haley had chosen the ones that demonstrated the range, from the screaming fury of message 2 to the cold, threatening clarity of message 4, and granted a temporary protective order. Natalie was prohibited from contacting Connor directly, from appearing at his residence, and from visiting his workplace. The order was served at the Starlight Motor Lodge on a Thursday afternoon. Whitmore handled it through a professional process server, not Connor, clean and impersonal. The kind of delivery that says this isn't personal, this is institutional, which is somehow worse. That same week, Charles Delaney walked into Whitmore's office on his own. Haley called Connor that evening, her voice carrying the particular satisfaction of someone whose long-term strategy had just paid its final dividend. Charlie came in today, no prompting, no phone call. He walked in off the street, sat down, and said he wanted to submit his affidavit voluntarily. Why now? The restraining order spooked him. He's thinking about his own custody situation. Diane's lawyer is building a case that he has poor judgment in relationships, that he exposes the kids to unstable people. Charlie's thinking if this thing goes to trial and he gets subpoenaed, he wants to be on the right side of it. Cooperating voluntarily looks a lot better than being dragged in. What's in the affidavit? Everything. The full timeline: first meeting at his warehouse, first dinner, first time she stayed the night. The lies she told him about your marriage, the credit card she opened in his name, her quitting the bank, the fights, the calls to his ex-wife, the scenes at his workplace. Haley paused. He also included something we didn't ask for. He wrote about her behavior when she moved in, the way she took over his space, threw out his things, isolated him from his coworkers, controlled the finances. It reads like a textbook escalation pattern. You sound impressed. I'm thorough. There's a difference. But there was a note of satisfaction in her voice she couldn't quite hide. That Friday evening, the three of them sat in Whitmore's office after hours. The building was quiet. The elevator had been turned off for the night, and the stairwell echoed with the distant sound of traffic on Lexington Street. Whitmore had coffee. Haley had her legal pad. Connor had nothing in his hands for once, no lighter, no tool, no prop to occupy his fingers. He sat with his hands on his knees and listened. Whitmore laid it out. We now have 4 pillars, he said, arranging folders on his desk like a man setting a table. 1. The signed post-nuptial agreement, executed voluntarily by Mrs. Murphy, witnessed and dated, which removes the pension and the apartment from the negotiation. 2. The temporary restraining order, which documents a pattern of harassment and undermines any claim of emotional distress on her part. 3. The Delaney affidavit, which corroborates the adultery timeline and documents Mrs. Murphy's financial manipulation and behavioral instability. 4. Mrs. Murphy's own recorded voicemails, which speak for themselves. He paused, took a sip of coffee. We send her a final offer, the same equitable split we proposed at the beginning, half of remaining joint assets, which at this point amounts to approximately $3,000 after her legal expenses have drained the accounts. No alimony, no pension, no claim to the apartment. Each party walks away clean. And if she refuses, Connor asked. If she refuses, we proceed to trial. We present everything, and we ask the court to award you legal fees based on her pattern of frivolous claims and documented harassment. At that point, she doesn't just walk away with nothing, she walks away owing you money. The room was quiet. The office smelled like old carpet and coffee and the particular staleness of a building that had been processing people's worst days for 3 decades. Send it, Connor said. Haley looked at him. You sure? There's no take-backsies on this one, Murphy. I'm sure. He wasn't seeking revenge anymore. That surprised him in a distant way, like noticing a bruise you didn't remember getting. Somewhere between the voicemails and the restraining order and Charles Delaney's mismatched socks, the anger had burned itself down to ash. What was left wasn't fury, it wasn't satisfaction, it was just a man who wanted a clean cut, a surgical severance, a door that closed all the way. Whitmore sealed the offer in an envelope, addressed it to Natalie's last known address, the Starlight Motor Lodge, room 14. Connor stood up, shook Whitmore's hand, nodded to Haley. He walked down the stairwell out into the evening air. Baltimore smelled like exhaust and rain and the harbor. He got in his Honda, sat for a moment without starting the engine, and thought about nothing in particular. The streetlights came on one by one along Lexington. A bus, not his route, a different number, rumbled past, its windows glowing yellow. He started the car and drove home. The offer would arrive tomorrow. Natalie would read it in a motel room that charged by the week, and she would understand, finally, that the quiet man she dismissed as small and passionless had been paying attention the entire time. The board was set, every piece in its place. All that was left was the endgame. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday in April. 10 in the morning, second floor of the Baltimore County Circuit Court Annex, a building that smelled like floor wax and stale vending machine coffee, and the accumulated anxiety of 1,000 marriages being taken apart at the seams. I wore my only suit. Charcoal gray, bought for Natalie's cousin's wedding 6 years ago. It still fit mostly. Haley had ironed the shirt for me the night before without being asked, which was either a kindness or an indication that she'd seen my ironing and decided intervention was necessary. Probably both. Whitmore met me in the lobby. He was carrying a single manila folder, thin, unimpressive, the kind of folder you'd use for a phone bill or a car insurance claim. Inside it was everything. The postnuptial, the restraining order, Charles's affidavit, transcripts of 11 voicemails, the police report from the depot, 12 months of a marriage collapsing compressed into maybe 40 pages. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I want this to be over." "Good, that's the right answer." He adjusted his glasses. "There's one thing I need from you today, Mr. Murphy, don't react. Whatever she says, whatever she does, you sit there and you let me handle it. Can you do that?" "I've been doing that for 20 years. He almost smiled, almost. Haley was already upstairs, sitting on a bench outside the mediation room, her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of someone who was not actually reading anything but needed something to do with her hands. She looked up when we approached. "She's already in there," Haley said. "Showed up early. New lawyer, junior associate from Sable's firm." Kid looks about 25. He's carrying a briefcase that still has the store tag on the handle. "Sable sent his B-team," Whitmore said. It wasn't a question. "Sable sent the guy who draws the short straw." Haley stood up, smoothed her blazer. "Which tells you everything about how he thinks this ends." We went in. The mediation room was small and beige and designed to make everyone feel equally uncomfortable. A rectangular table, 6 chairs, a water pitcher that nobody would touch, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look like they hadn't slept in a week. Which, in Natalie's case, might have been accurate. She was sitting on the far side of the table. I hadn't seen her since the night she signed the postnuptial, nearly 2 months. She looked different. Not bad exactly, but diminished. The word that came to mind was compressed, like something that had been squeezed down to fit a smaller container. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her blazer was one I didn't recognize, borrowed, maybe, or bought cheap for the occasion. The makeup under her left eye was slightly uneven, a detail I catalogued without wanting to. Beside her sat a young man with thin-framed glasses and a legal pad that was conspicuously blank. He stood when we entered, extended his hand to Whitmore with the earnest formality of someone who'd graduated law school recently enough to still believe in handshakes. "Andrew Pace. I'm representing Mrs. Murphy on behalf of Sable and Associates." "Gerald Whitmore?" They shook. Whitmore didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The mediator arrived last. A woman in her early 60s with gray hair cropped close and reading glasses hanging on a beaded chain. She introduced herself as Judge Dorothy Kessler, retired, now doing private mediation. Her voice had the particular flatness of someone who'd heard every version of every divorce story and had stopped being moved by any of them approximately a decade ago. "Good morning. Let's keep this efficient." She sat at the head of the table, opened a folder. "I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Mr. Whitmore, you've submitted a proposed settlement. Mr. Pace, your client has not yet responded formally. Is that correct?" "That's correct, Your Honor, I mean, Ms. Kessler." Andrew Pace flushed. "We're here to discuss terms." "Then let's discuss." She looked at Whitmore. "Counselor, lay out your position." Whitmore opened his thin folder. He didn't argue. That was the thing I remembered most clearly afterward, the total absence of drama. He just talked, calmly, chronologically, the way you'd read a maintenance report or a weather summary. "Here is what happened, and here is how we know, and here is what it means." He started with the marriage, 20 years. He stated the filing date, the grounds, adultery under Maryland Family Law Section 7103, and the initial evidence, phone records, photographs. Dates and times from Connor's notebook. He didn't linger on these. They were the foundation, not the point. Then he introduced the Delaney affidavit. He placed a copy in front of Judge Kessler, another in front of Andrew Pace. He summarized it in 3 sentences. The timeline of the affair, Natalie's proactive initiation, and her subsequent financial manipulation of Mr. Delaney, including the unauthorized credit card. Pace picked up the document. His eyebrows climbed as he read. He leaned toward Natalie and whispered something. She shook her head once sharply. Whitmore continued. The postnuptial agreement, signed voluntarily by Mrs. Murphy on the specified date, which excluded Mr. Murphy's pension and personal property from marital asset division. He placed the original on the table, Natalie's signature in blue Bic ink at the bottom. Then the restraining order, the police report from the bus depot. And finally, a USB drive containing the voicemail recordings with printed transcripts provided for reference. He arranged everything on the table in a neat row. 5 documents, 1 USB drive. the clinical autopsy of a 20-year marriage laid out like evidence at an inquest. Our proposed settlement is identical to our original offer from last year, Whitmore said. An equitable division of remaining marital assets, approximately $3,200 split 50-50. No alimony, no pension claim. Each party retains personal property and walks away clean. If this offer is rejected, we proceed to trial where we will present all of the above and petition for Mrs. Murphy to cover Mr. Murphy's legal fees based on the pattern of frivolous claims and documented harassment. He closed the folder, took off his glasses, waited. The room was quiet. The fluorescent light hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang 3 times and stopped. Natalie spoke first. "This is a setup." Her voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the tremor underneath, the vibration of a person holding themselves together through sheer force of will. Everything in that folder was manufactured. He planned it. He sat in that apartment and he planned every single step, and now he's sitting there looking at me like I'm the criminal. "Mrs. Murphy," Pace started. 20 years. She wasn't looking at Pace. She was looking at me, directly at me across the table through the fluorescent light and the water pitcher and all the legal paperwork stacked between us. 20 years I gave you. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked full time. I held that marriage together while you drove your bus and polished your lighters and disappeared into your little world. And when I finally tried to find something for myself, you turned it into this. Her voice cracked. Her eyes were wet. And even now, even after everything, some part of me, the part that remembered her at 19, the part that had never fully left that diner in Fells Point where she stole my fries and I fell in love with the way she laughed, felt something pull. Then Judge Kessler spoke. "Mrs. Murphy." Her tone was not unkind, but it was final. The way a doctor sounds when they've looked at the scan and there's nothing left to try. "Your behavior is documented in these filings, the restraining order, the workplace incident, the voicemails which I've reviewed in transcript." She tapped the stack of papers with one finger. "I understand this is painful, but I suggest we focus on the practical matters at hand." Natalie's mouth opened. Closed, she looked at Andrew Pace, who was studying the affidavit with the expression of a man realizing he'd brought a plastic fork to a sword fight. "Can I have a moment with my client?" Pace asked. 5 minutes, Kessler said. They stepped into the hallway. Through the closed door, I could hear the murmur of voices, paces low and rapid, Natalie's rising and falling. Haley sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, perfectly still. "You okay?" she whispered. "Yeah. Liar. Yeah." 5 minutes turned into 8. When they came back, Natalie's face had changed. The fight was gone, not replaced by acceptance, replaced by something colder, harder, a look I'd never seen on her in 20 years of marriage. The look of a person who has run out of moves and knows it and hates everyone in the room for being there to witness it. Pace cleared his throat. "My client is prepared to accept the proposed terms." The signing took less than 2 minutes. Whitmore had the dissolution papers ready, typed, printed, tabbed with yellow flags at every signature line. Natalie signed each one without reading them. The pen moved across the pages in quick, angry strokes, pressing hard enough that I could hear the paper compress under the tip. When she finished, she pushed the stack across the table. Whitmore collected the pages, checked each signature, and nodded to Kessler. "We're done here," Kessler said. She stood, shook both lawyers' hands, and left. The door clicked shut behind her. Andrew Pace packed his briefcase, store tag still on the handle, and told Natalie he'd send the finalized documents by mail. He left quickly, the way people leave rooms where something has died. Whitmore shook my hand. "I'll file everything today. It's over, Mr. Murphy." Then it was just me and Haley and Natalie and the empty water pitcher and the fluorescent hum. Natalie stood. She picked up her purse. She walked toward the door, and I thought she was going to leave without another word, and part of me wanted that, a clean exit, no more dialogue, no more performances. She stopped in the doorway. "Connor!" I stood, turned to face her. All the masks were gone. The tears, the anger, the contrition, the therapy speak, the charm, all of it stripped away. What was left was raw and honest and ugly, the first completely genuine expression I'd seen on her face in longer than I could remember. "You were always a small, petty man," she said. Each word deliberate, aimed, meant to wound in the specific way that only someone who has known you for 2 decades can wound. "And you always will be." The room was quiet. Haley stood behind me. I could feel her tense, ready to intervene, to say something sharp and defensive on my behalf. But I didn't need defending, not anymore. I smiled. It came out small, tired, and to my own surprise, genuine. Not a victory smile, not a smirk. Just the expression of a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had finally set it down. "You're probably right," I said. "But I'm a free one." I turned and walked out with Haley beside me. Down the hallway, past the vending machines and the bulletin board and the other couples waiting for their own reckonings. Through the lobby, out the glass doors into the April air. Baltimore smelled like spring, wet asphalt, blooming trees, exhaust, the harbor somewhere in the distance. The sky was gray with patches of blue breaking through, the kind of sky that can't decide what it wants to be. We stood on the courthouse steps. Haley looked at me. "How do you feel?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Hungry," I said. She blinked. Then she laughed, a short, surprised sound like a cough that turned into something warmer. "There's a diner on Lombard," she said. "Then let's go." We walked. The morning traffic moved around us. The city went about its business, completely indifferent to the fact that somewhere upstairs, a 20-year marriage had just been reduced to a stack of papers and a quiet hallway and a woman standing alone in a room with an empty water pitcher. I didn't look back. The first week was fine. The second week was fine. The third week, the bottom dropped out. It happened on a Wednesday night, Elijah's usual night, except Elijah had a double shift at the sanitation yard and texted me at 6. "Can't make it. Next week. Sorry, brother," 2 words of apology, which for Elijah was practically a sonnet. So I sat in the apartment alone, and for the first time since the mediation, the silence wasn't neutral. It was loud. It was the sound of a place where someone used to live and didn't anymore, and the difference between alone and lonely. A difference I'd been managing carefully for weeks, collapsed like a wall made of paper. I sat in my armchair. The TV was off. The jukebox was in the corner, still broken. I'd been working on the wiring harness, but the replacement coin mechanism from eBay turned out to be the wrong model, and I'd need to find another. The lighters were on the shelf, polished, arranged, perfect. Everything in its place, and none of it mattered. I'd won. That was the part nobody tells you about. You win the divorce, you keep the apartment, you protect the pension, you outmaneuver everyone at every turn. And then you're sitting in a chair at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday with nobody to talk to, and the victory tastes like cardboard, and you realize that winning and being happy are 2 completely different things that don't even live in the same neighborhood. I didn't make dinner that night. I went to bed at 9, lay there in the dark, listened to the building settle around me, the pipes, the heat, the distant thump of a neighbor's bass. The same sounds as always. But the bed was too wide, and the pillow next to mine still had a faint indent from years of someone else's head, and I'd been meaning to replace it and kept not replacing it for reasons I didn't want to examine. The days blurred. I drove my routes. The kids were loud, and I was grateful for that. Their noise filled the space in my head where the silence lived. The girl with the missing tooth had grown it back, a new one pushing through, bright white and slightly too big for her face. She told me about her cat. She told me about her teacher. She talked enough for both of us. But when the routes ended, and the bus was parked and inspected, and I was back in my Honda heading home, the emptiness was there in the passenger seat like a hitchhiker I couldn't drop off. Through Whitmore's office, not the gossip chain, not second-hand, I learned what happened to the others. Charles Delaney requested a transfer to a distribution center in North Carolina. His company approved it within a week, which probably said something about how eager they were to move him along after the workplace drama. He was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in a town I'd never heard of, seeing his kids on a laptop screen every other Sunday. The dented Explorer was gone, repossessed, according to the filing his ex-wife's lawyer submitted. He was driving a company vehicle now, starting over at 41 in a state where he knew nobody, carrying debt he'd be paying off for years. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I didn't feel much of anything. He was just another man who'd made a bad choice and was living with the consequences, same as everyone. Natalie moved in with her aunt in Frederick, about an hour west of Baltimore. She got a job as a teller, not head teller, just a teller, at a small community bank. Starting over at the bottom of a ladder she'd already climbed once. The grand passion, the escape from her small life, the soulmate narrative she'd built around Charlie, all of it had delivered her to a smaller life than the one she'd fled. There was an irony there so neat it almost felt scripted, and maybe that should have given me pleasure, but it didn't. It just made me tired. Some nights I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to tell Natalie something, a weird thing that happened on the route, a score from a game, the kind of meaningless, ambient communication that fills up 20 years of shared life. The impulse would fire before my brain caught up, and then the realization would land, and I'd put the phone down and sit with the quiet for a while. That was grief, I figured, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that makes you scream or break things. The kind that just sits in the corner of the room like furniture you keep bumping into, and after a while you learn to walk around it, but you never quite move it out. Elijah came the following Wednesday. He brought a six-pack of Natty Boh and a bag of pretzels, which was his version of a care package. We watched the Orioles lose. Badly. "This team," Elijah said during the seventh inning, the first words either of us had spoken in 40 minutes. "Yeah, you still moping. I'm not moping. You're moping, you've got that look, like a dog that got off its leash and doesn't know where to go. That's poetic, Eli. I'm a poetic man." He took a long drink. "You should get out of this apartment. It smells like lighter fluid and regret. It smells like lighter fluid because I clean my lighters. The regret might be coming from your shoes." He looked down at his work boots. "Fair point." He finished the beer. "But I'm serious. You're going to turn into one of those guys who talks to his furniture." I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. The next Saturday, Haley showed up at my door with 2 tickets to a community theater production of 12 Angry Men at a church basement in Hampton. "Get dressed," she said. "And before you say no, I already know you're going to say no, and I've pre-decided to ignore it." I wasn't going to say no. Liar. "You were going to say you're busy, and then I was going to point out that your idea of busy is rearranging your lighter display for the 3rd time this month. Get dressed." The production was terrible. Magnificently, heroically terrible. The guy playing juror number 8 kept forgetting his lines and covering by saying, "The point is," before trailing off. Juror number 3 had a southern accent that came and went like weather. The folding chairs were metal and unforgiving, and the church basement smelled like mildew and potluck casserole. Haley spent the entire first act whispering commentary. "That's not how deliberation works. Is he sweating? He's actually sweating. If this jury were real, they'd convict just to go home." I started laughing somewhere in the second act. Not at the play, at Haley, who was now doing a running critique so dry and precise that it was better than anything happening on stage. The laugh started small, a compressed exhale through the nose, and then it grew, and then it was real. And then the woman in front of us turned around and glared, which made Haley whisper, "We've been found out," in a mock-serious voice, which made it worse. I laughed until my ribs hurt. I couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Walking back to the car afterward, the night air cool and smelling like the greasy warmth of a nearby food truck, Haley said, "See, you didn't die. I came close. That second act almost killed me. Juror number 7, the one who kept looking at the exit sign. He wanted out more than the defendant." She smiled. Not her strategic smile, the one I'd seen during the divorce, all angles and calculation. This one was crooked and unguarded and lasted longer than she probably intended. "Same time next month?" she asked. "They're doing Our Town." I've been told it's even worse. "I'll be there." 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning with nothing planned and nowhere to be, I drove out of the city. No destination. Just driving, the Honda's windows cracked, the May air pushing through. I ended up at a flea market in a field off Route 1, halfway to Bel Air, the kind of place where people sell old tools and questionable furniture from the backs of pickup trucks, and everything costs either $1 or make me an offer. I wasn't looking for lighters. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just walking, letting the noise wash over me, the haggling, the country music from someone's portable radio, the smell of funnel cakes and motor oil. At a table near the far end, between a box of tarnished silverware and a stack of water-damaged magazines, I saw it. A ceramic owl, about 6 inches tall, painted in colors that could only be described as aggressive. Bright orange body, purple eyes, one wing noticeably larger than the other. It was, objectively, the ugliest thing I had ever seen. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing. "That's $1, said the woman behind the table. She was in her 70s, wearing a sun hat and an expression that suggested she knew exactly how ugly the owl was and had priced accordingly. "A whole $1. I'll go as low as $1. I bought it. I carried it to the car in a paper bag. I drove home and put it on the shelf in the living room between the row of Zippos and a framed photo I hadn't gotten around to removing, one of me and Natalie at a crab feast years ago, both of us sunburned and squinting. I took down the photo. I left the owl. It was the first thing I'd chosen for myself, for no practical reason, for no one else, purely because it made me smile in 20 years. A hideous $1 ceramic owl. It sat on the shelf and stared at me with its mismatched purple eyes, and something inside me shifted just slightly, like a door that had been painted shut, cracking open a millimeter. Not healing, not yet. Just the possibility of it. The jukebox took 3 months. It sat in the corner of my living room like a patient in a coma, big, silent, full of potential energy with no way to express it. A 1958 Seeburg Selectomatic walnut cabinet, chrome trim gone green in patches. I'd found it at a thrift store on Greenmount back before the mediation, hauled it home in the back of Elijah's truck while he questioned my sanity. "You don't even have records," Elijah had said. "I'll get records. You're replacing one obsession with a bigger obsession, literally bigger. That thing weighs 200 pounds. 220, I said. The manual says 220. Oh, he's got the manual. The first coin mechanism I'd ordered was wrong, different model year, different wiring. The second one arrived cracked. The third fit perfectly but revealed a deeper problem. The amplifier tube was blown, which meant the whole audio chain was dead. I spent 2 weekends tracing circuits with a voltmeter, teaching myself vacuum tube electronics from a library book that smelled like 1974. I liked the work. It was different from the lighters, less delicate, more physical. The Seeburg required me to lie on my back on the living room floor, reaching into its guts with a flashlight clenched between my teeth, my fingers black with decades of dust and old grease. It required trips to specialty electronics shops in parts of Baltimore I'd never visited, conversations with old men who spoke about capacitors the way other people spoke about grandchildren. It was a project that couldn't be rushed, and I was a man who had nowhere to rush to. A good match. Meanwhile, Haley needed a bookshelf. She'd mentioned it in passing one evening. We'd fallen into a habit of coffee in the lobby of the building on Saturday mornings, both of us too stubborn to admit it had become a routine. She was complaining about the state of her apartment, the boxes she still hadn't unpacked after 2 years, the legal brief stacked on her kitchen table because she had nowhere else to put them. "I need shelves," she said. "Real ones, not the particle board garbage from the furniture store that sags after a month." "I could build you one." She looked at me over her coffee. "You build furniture." "I fix things. A bookshelf is just a box with no lid. How hard can it be?" Famous last words. It turned out to be harder than I expected, which Haley pointed out approximately every 30 minutes during the build. Her apartment was a mirror layout of mine, same bones, different life. Where my space was sparse and organized, hers was dense and chaotic in a way that somehow still made sense. Legal textbooks stacked on the kitchen counter. A corkboard covered in Post-its and business cards, and a torn-out magazine photo of a beach somewhere tropical. A pair of running shoes by the door with the laces permanently knotted because she never untied them, just forced her feet in and out. We worked on the bookshelf over 2 Saturdays. I brought the tools. She brought the opinions. "That's not level." "It's level. I have a level. The level says it's level." "The level is wrong. Look at it. It's tilting left." "Haley, if you don't trust the tools, why did you ask me to bring them?" "I trust the tools. I don't trust the operator." She said it with a grin, and I threw a wood shaving at her, and she threw it back. And for about 10 minutes we were just 2 people in a sawdust-covered apartment laughing about nothing. Her legal briefs got pushed to the floor to make room for the lumber. My toolbox sat open on her kitchen table. The boundaries of our spaces were blurring in small, easy ways that neither of us commented on. During a break, sitting on her floor with our backs against the wall and mugs of coffee going cold beside us, she told me about David. "We were engaged for 8 months, she said. Not heavy, not dramatic, the same analytical tone she used for everything. He was a financial planner, very organized, very precise. He had spreadsheets for our wedding budget, our 5-year plan, our projected household income. He had a spreadsheet for the spreadsheets. Sounds thorough. Sounds controlling, which is what it was, but it took me an embarrassing amount of time to see it. He didn't want a wife. He wanted an asset he could manage. When I got the paralegal job and started working late, he'd call the office to check in, which meant check up. When I made friends he hadn't vetted, he'd get quiet for days. Not angry quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you've done something wrong without him ever saying a word. I knew that quiet. I'd lived with a different version of it. What ended it? I came home one night and he'd reorganized my closet without asking. He'd sorted everything by color and season and thrown out the things he thought were unflattering. There was a bag by the door with 6 of my shirts in it. She took a sip of cold coffee. That's when I knew it wasn't about the shirts. It was about the fact that he couldn't leave a single corner of my life untouched. Did you confront him? I gave back the ring on a Tuesday. He asked if we could discuss it over the weekend like it was a calendar item. She almost smiled. I was out of the apartment by Thursday. We sat with that for a while. The sawdust floated in a beam of afternoon sun coming through her window. Your story isn't unique, she said after a minute. Neither is mine. That's the thing I had to learn. The details are different, your wife, my fiancé, the specifics of how they broke us, but the shape is the same. Someone you trust decides your life is something they can rearrange without asking. That's a depressing thought. It's a freeing one. It means you're not specially cursed. You're just human, and humans are occasionally terrible to each other. She knocked her shoulder against mine. Present company accepted. You don't know that. I might be terrible. You built me a bookshelf. Terrible people don't build bookshelves. The bookshelf, when finished, was slightly imperfect. The left side was a 1/4 inch taller than the right, despite what the level said. Haley loaded it with her legal texts and her paperbacks and a framed photo of her mother and a small clay pot with a plant she swore she'd keep alive this time. It looked good. Solid. The kind of thing that would last. At home, I packed the last of Natalie's things. They'd been sitting in the bedroom closet for months. A cardboard box of clothes she'd never come back for, a shoebox of old photos, a hair dryer with a frayed cord, a coffee mug from a vacation we took to Ocean City in 2003. Small artifacts of a shared life gathering dust. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them in a dumpster. I didn't have a dramatic moment standing over the box, wrestling with memories. I just sealed it with packing tape, drove it to the Goodwill on Harford Road, and handed it to the guy at the donation door. Anything fragile? He asked. No, I said, nothing fragile. I drove home. That evening I finished the jukebox. The problem had been the ground wire, a single black cable, thin as a pencil lead that had corroded at the connection point inside the amplifier chassis. I'd missed it 6 times. The 7th time, lying on my back with the flashlight and a magnifying glass, I saw the faint green discoloration where the copper had oxidized. I cleaned it, soldered a new lead, and reconnected it. I slid the chassis back into the cabinet, plugged the Seeburg into the wall. The transformer hummed a low, warm sound like a sleeping animal waking up. The pilot light glowed amber behind the selection panel. I reached into the box of 45s I'd been collecting from thrift stores and flea markets. A dozen records, mostly scratched, mostly forgotten. I pulled one out at random. Roy Orbison, In Dreams. I placed it in the mechanism, pushed the selection button. The machine whirred. The arm lifted, swung over the platter, and lowered. There was a hiss, a pop, and then music, warm, crackly, imperfect. The scratch on the vinyl added a texture that made it sound like the song was being played in another room, in another decade, filtering through walls and time. Orbison's voice, high and aching, filled the apartment, every corner, every empty shelf, every space where silence had lived for months. I sat in my armchair. The ceramic owl was on the shelf to my right, staring with its purple eyes. The lighters were arranged on the shelf to my left, chrome and brass catching the evening light. The jukebox glowed in the corner, its walnut cabinet vibrating slightly with the bass. I listened. I felt neither happy nor sad. I felt present, here, in this room, in this moment, with music playing in a space that was mine, imperfect, incomplete, but mine, not shared, not contested, not the backdrop for someone else's dissatisfaction. Just a room with a man and a machine and a song and a ridiculous owl, and the specific earned peace of someone who has come through something hard and landed, not on their feet exactly, but on solid ground. The record ended. The arm lifted. The mechanism whirred. Silence returned, but a different silence. A silence with music still in it, the way a room holds warmth after a fire goes out. I didn't put on another record. I just sat there in the quiet and let it be enough. Months passed. Summer burned through Baltimore and fall followed, and the city did what Baltimore always does. It endured gracelessly with stubborn persistence and no apologies. My routine had changed. Not dramatically, I'm not a dramatic man, despite recent evidence to the contrary. The bus routes were the same. The morning coffee was the same. The lighters still got polished on Tuesday nights, same as always. But the spaces between the familiar things had filled in with new material, the way mortar fills gaps between bricks. Elijah and I had dinner every other Thursday now. We'd graduated from beer and ball games to actual restaurants, which for Elijah was a seismic shift. His idea of a restaurant was anywhere that had menus, which meant we'd found ourselves at a Salvadoran place on Eastern Avenue where neither of us could read the menu and both of us ordered by pointing. "This is good," Elijah said, looking at his plate with the suspicious admiration of a man encountering pupuses for the first time. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised. I've been eating the same 4 things for 15 years. This is a crisis of identity. A pupusa crisis. Don't mock my growth, Connor." Haley and I had fallen into our own rhythm. Pizza and bad movies on Saturday nights, alternating apartments. She'd introduced me to a horror franchise so absurd that the 4th installment featured a villain who killed people with a possessed lawn mower, and we'd watched all 6 entries over the course of a month, arguing about which death was the most ridiculous. "The sprinkler scene," Haley said. "No contest. The sprinkler scene was lazy. The lawnmower through the car wash, that took creativity." "Creativity? He drove it through a car wash. That's not creativity, that's property damage. In the context of a possessed lawnmower franchise, property damage is creativity." She threw a piece of popcorn at me. I caught it. She looked impressed, then annoyed that she was impressed. Normal. It all felt normal, and the normalcy of it was the thing I noticed most. How quickly a new life can start to feel like it's always been this way, if you let it. The job offer came on a Tuesday. Haley delivered it, because of course she did. She knocked on my door in the evening with a takeout bag from the Thai place on Fleet Street and a proposition. "Whitmore wants to talk to you," she said, settling onto my couch and unpacking containers with the efficiency of someone who'd done this enough times to have a system. "About what?" "About a job, part-time, off the books, mostly cash." "Doing what?" "Process serving, basic surveillance. Nothing dangerous, just delivering court documents to people who don't want to receive them, and occasionally sitting in a car watching a house to confirm someone is or isn't where they say they are." "That's a job." "That's a Tuesday for most pies, but Whitmore can't afford a pie. He can afford a meticulous bus driver with good observational skills and a car that nobody notices." She opened a container of pad Thai. "He was impressed by you during the divorce, the notebook, the photos, the way you documented everything. He said, and this is a direct quote, 'That man has the patience of a surveillance camera and the organizational skills of a filing cabinet.' It was the nicest thing I've ever heard him say about anyone. I thought about it while we ate. The extra money would help bus drivers in Baltimore don't get rich, but it was more than the money. It was the idea that the skills I'd developed out of necessity, the watching, the waiting, the noticing, had value beyond just surviving my own disaster. "Tell him I'm in," I said. "Already did." She smiled into her noodles. "I know you, Murphy." The first job was simple. Serve a subpoena to a woman named Carla DeStefano at a diner on Belair Road. She was a witness in a custody case who'd been dodging Whitmore's office for 3 weeks. I had a physical description, a photograph, and the address of the diner where she ate lunch every Wednesday. I drove there, parked, walked in. The diner was the kind of Baltimore institution that had been serving the same menu since the Kennedy administration: vinyl booths, a counter with stools, coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Carter years and kept warm through sheer institutional will. I scanned the room for Carla DeStefano. I found her at a booth near the window. Mid-50s, red hair, reading glasses on a chain. I walked over, confirmed her identity, handed her the envelope. She looked annoyed but not surprised. "Took you long enough," she said, which I figured was a compliment. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw Natalie. She was 3 booths away, facing my direction, sitting with 2 women I didn't recognize, co-workers probably from the lanyards around their necks. They'd been laughing about something when I walked in. I'd been too focused on the Di Stefano serve to scan the rest of the room. Our eyes met across the diner. Across the vinyl and the coffee steam and the 6 months of silence since the mediation room. The laughter died on her face. Not dramatically, it just faded the way a radio signal weakens when you drive out of range. Her expression cycled through something fast and complex. Surprise, then recognition, then a hard, unreadable blankness that settled like a mask. She looked older. Not bad, just weathered, the way people look when they've been through something and haven't fully come out the other side. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing a blouse I didn't recognize and a name tag I couldn't read from this distance. I held her gaze for 1 second. Then I gave a small nod, the kind you'd give a distant acquaintance, someone you recognize from somewhere but can't quite place. A polite, neutral, nearly empty gesture. She didn't nod back, she didn't look away either. She just held the gaze, and in it I saw something I hadn't expected. Not hatred like the hallway outside the mediation room, not performance. Something closer to bewilderment, the look of a person trying to reconcile the man standing in a diner with a manila envelope with the man she'd shared a bed with for 20 years. I turned and walked out. The bell above the door chimed. The October air hit my face, cool and clean, smelling like fallen leaves and exhaust. I got in my car, sat for a moment. Started the engine and drove to my next stop. That was it. No confrontation, no parting words, no closure beyond the closure we'd already signed in a courthouse annex. Just two people who used to be everything to each other, now reduced to a nod across a diner. That's how it ends, not with fire, with distance. The painting happened on a Sunday. Haley had decided her bathroom needed to be a color called Quiet Sage, which was marketing language for green. I'd offered to help because I had a roller and a drop cloth and nothing else planned, and because somewhere in the past few months, helping Haley with things had become less of a favor and more of a default setting. Her bathroom was small, which meant we were working in close quarters, her cutting in at the edges with a brush, me rolling the main walls, both of us stepping around each other in a space barely big enough for one person. "You're dripping," she said. "I'm not dripping. There's a drip right there on the baseboard. That was there before we started. It was not there before we started. I live here, I know my baseboards. You just said last week you hadn't noticed a crack in your ceiling for 2 years. Ceilings and baseboards are different categories of attention, Murphy. Don't change the subject." I knelt to wipe the drip, which was, admittedly, mine, and when I stood back up, she was right there, close. Closer than the bathroom required, though the bathroom was partly to blame. There was paint in her hair, a smear of Quiet Sage on her left temple that she didn't know about. Her sleeves were rolled up, and there was a line of green across her forearm where she'd leaned against the wet wall. She reached for the roller at the same time I did. Our hands met on the handle. Not dramatically, no spark, no slow motion. Just skin against skin, fingers overlapping on a paint-covered roller in a small bathroom that smelled like latex paint and the coffee she'd made an hour ago. We both stopped. She looked at me. I looked at her. The moment stretched, not with tension exactly, but with recognition, the acknowledgement of something that had been building in the background for months. Underneath the legal pads and the bad movies and the bookshelf and the popcorn, something neither of us had named because naming it would mean deciding what to do about it. Her eyes were brown. I'd known that. But I hadn't really noticed, the specific shade, warm, almost amber in the afternoon light coming through the bathroom's small window. She had a freckle below her left ear that I'd never seen before, probably because I'd never been this close in this kind of light. The air changed. That's the only way to describe it. The same air, the same room, but the quality of it shifted, the way a room feels different when someone lights a candle. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there, hands on a roller, paint drying on our arms, looking at each other with the cautious, tentative expression of two people who have both been hurt and both know it, and are both trying to figure out if this is brave or stupid or both. Then Haley smiled, a little crookedly, one side of her mouth lifting before the other. "You're getting paint on the floor, Murphy." I looked down. She was right. A small green puddle was forming beneath the roller where we'd both stopped paying attention to gravity. "That one's yours," I said. "It's your roller. It's your floor. Fair point." She let go of the handle, stepped back. The moment didn't break, it settled like sediment in water, finding its level. Still there, just distributed differently. We finished the bathroom. It took another hour and we argued about cutting technique and whether a second coat was necessary and whether quiet sage looked more like loud mint under the bathroom light. Normal conversation. Easy rhythm. But underneath it, the new thing hummed low and steady, like a transformer warming up. I went home that evening. My apartment was quiet, but the quality of the quiet had changed over the months. It wasn't empty anymore. The jukebox glowed in the corner. The ceramic owl held its shelf with absurd confidence. The lighters were in their row, polished and orderly. Sawdust from the bookshelf project was still ground into the carpet near the door, and I hadn't vacuumed it up because it reminded me of a good Saturday. I sat in my armchair. The window was open and the night air carried the sound of the city, traffic, a distant siren, someone's music, a dog barking. Baltimore doing what it does. I picked up the lighter from the side table. The 1967 Zippo Slim, brushed chrome, barely a scratch. The same one I'd been polishing the night Natalie came home late and everything started. I turned it in my fingers, felt the weight of it. The smooth, familiar metal warm from my hand. I didn't know what would happen with Haley. I didn't know if the thing in the bathroom was a beginning or a moment or something that would fade by next Saturday. I didn't know if the job with Whitmore would turn into something real or stay a side hustle paid in cash and manila envelopes. I didn't have grand plans. I'd learned the hard way that grand plans are just predictions dressed up in nice clothes, and predictions are what people make when they want to feel like they're in control of things that can't be controlled. What I had was this, an apartment that was mine, a job that got me up in the morning, a friend who ate pupuses with me and didn't ask how I was feeling, a neighbor with paint in her hair who argued about baseboards and made me laugh in church basements, a jukebox that worked, an owl that shouldn't. I flicked the lighter, click-clack, the lid opened, the wheel turned. A small, steady flame rose in the still air of my living room, perfectly vertical, perfectly contained. A fire I controlled. Not a wildfire, not a blaze, not the kind of flame that burns everything down and leaves you standing in the ashes. Just a small, warm, reliable light. I looked at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Not a big smile, not a victory smile. The quiet, weathered expression of a man who has survived the worst thing he could imagine and come out the other side not triumphant, not transformed, not reborn, just alive. Present. Sitting in his own space, in his own silence, no longer afraid of either. The flame held steady. The story doesn't end with a kiss or a fortune or a lesson learned. It ends here with a man in a chair, a flame in the dark, and the faint, unfamiliar warmth of something he hasn't felt in a very long time. Hope, cautious, open-ended, making no promises. But there, click-clack, the lid closed, the room was dark, the city hummed, the owl stared. And Connor Murphy, 39 years old, school bus driver, lighter collector, jukebox repairman, survivor, sat in the quiet and let it be enough.